Now, many have said the best way to solve the problem of British IS fighters abroad is to kill them in battle, even the Defence Secretary, Gavin Williamson. Critics say that's morally wrong and risks breaking international law. Joining me now in the studio, Clive Baldwin, Senior Legal Advisor at Human Rights Watch, and from Whiteley, the Conservative MP and member of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Bob Seely. Bob Seely, as a former soldier yourself, how did you feel when the former fireplace salesman, Gavin Williamson, suggested we should hunt down and kill British terrorists?
Well, I thought that was the point of the ISIS campaign, wasn't it?
Is that what you think we should do?
If we can capture them, let's capture them. The problem has been the risk involved. You know, it's not just a question of sort of getting a couple of policemen to knock on a door in Tabqadam and say, do you mind coming with us? The fact is, it's very difficult to find these people. It's very difficult to drop a bomb on them without potential collateral damage. So you have to drop a bomb when you're not going to be killing innocent people. It is not an easy thing to do to find and prosecute terrorists, and extremely vicious and unpleasant terrorists as well. So the whole point is that if we are at war with these people, we do have to find a way to capture or to kill them.
But should the aim of British soldiers in these theatres be to capture or kill?
Well, it depends on the circumstances. I think that's too simplistic a question, if you don't mind me saying so. If we can kill them, kill them. If we can safely capture them without undue risk to British forces, let's do that.
But there may be a choice sometimes, mightn't there?
There can be a choice. Our basic problem at the moment is that the detention, because of the application of British human rights law to British military action abroad in failed states and ungoverned territories and weak states, is that the detention pathway is so complex now that it's actually easier to drop a bomb on somebody than try to capture them. And that is one of the unforeseen consequences of the human rights lobby and the effect of the human rights lobby in the UK. It would be nice to get these people to face trial and to face justice and to face their victims. But if we can't do that, we have a duty to protect British people. And from that point of view, Gavin is absolutely correct.
Clive Baldwin, Bob Seely says Gavin Williamson was absolutely correct. Was he correct in your mind legally?
I mean, his words a few weeks ago were fairly loose, and we were not happy with them because they gave the impression that he was saying, as Defence Secretary, we should go out and kill ISIS soldiers where possible. And that's ignoring the fact there's two different sets of rules. One is very old, it's not even about human rights law. It's the law of war, the law of armed conflict, which says on the battlefield, you can target fighters who are fighting against you. But outside the battlefield and outside of war and armed conflict, the basic rules apply that when you capture people, you can only target people, kill them when they're about to use lethal force against you. And certainly in any war, in any conflict, when you have captured soldiers, when they're your prisoners, when they're so wounded that they can't fight anymore and you've captured them, then the basic rules apply.
But there is no problem with British forces deciding that they are not going to try and capture anybody alive. It's fine to kill them as a war aim. There's no moral or legal problem with that, as far as you're concerned.
It's not just for British forces to decide. It's the basic law that everyone is trained in, the law of war, that on the battlefield, but only on the battlefield, only against fighters who are fighting against you. And with the war against ISIS apparently winding
down... Does that count as a battlefield in that sense, if we are not on the battlefield in a conventional sense?
Well,
is Syria the battlefield in your terms?
Yeah, Syria is one area which is clearly a battlefield at the moment. I mean, Iraq has been a battlefield, but the war is winding down there. So we'd say that the war's about to end there.
Fine. So then what do we do now? They're in custody. Yeah. Should they come back? I mean, the Defence Secretary says no British terrorists should be allowed back into the country.
Well, I would agree completely with Nicolas Hennin to say what you have people suspected of some of the worst crimes that we've documented, war crimes, crimes against humanity. They should be put on trial, facing a fair trial where justice can be done. Justice not just for them, but for the victims of those crimes.
OK, Bob Seely, what do you think should happen to these men now that they're in custody?
Good question. I'd just take up a point that Clive said, because I think he makes some important points. The law of armed conflict here is absolutely critical, and he's right to say that. However, from my own personal experience, I'm very well aware of the amount of time that military lawyers spend looking over their shoulders at the potential for vexatious human rights complaints over our actions. So Clive is right to say that LOAC, the Law of Armed Conflict, is critical, but he's also missing out the point about vexatious human rights complaints, of which there were many, and most of which, almost all, were unfounded during the Iraq War.
Yeah, okay, all right. I mean that's a matter of fact in some cases in Iraq. But let's get to what should happen to these two men now. Do you think they should be brought into the country, into Britain, and tried?
We need to put them on trial somewhere. Maybe The Hague is the best place for them. I'm not sure we should particularly want them back in the UK, but we need to find somewhere that they can stand trial and their crimes can be accounted for and their victims can have a day in court. That's absolutely critical.
But there isn't a legal process, is there, for them to be put on trial in The Hague?
Well, that's one of the problems of the detention pathway. The fact is that we have been so unwilling to take prisoners in Iraq and in Syria and previously in Iraq, because the detention pathways were so fraught with danger, with legal danger for us. Because if somebody takes them prisoner and doesn't treat them right, then there could be a human rights complaint against them. If a regime that's not recognised in your law, like the SDF, these are effectively non-state actors. If they take them, what's their legal status? So the problem is that vexatious lawyers here can have an absolute field day. Tom Tugendhat wrote a very good report about this, The Fog of Law, several years ago, about the complexity of law, vexatious complaints and how it affects behaviour on the battlefield. We need to find somewhere that they can go on trial, stand trial for their crimes and hopefully never see the light of day again.
Bob Seeley, Clive Baldwin, thank you both very much. Jackie.